Hi, it's Sherry at Savvy Business Resolutions with another episode of Investing in Conversation, Conflict Management for Managers. Last time, I was talking to Julian Treasure about listening, which he calls the gateway to understanding. So I thought I'd follow that by looking at some barriers that create conflict or escalate it by blocking that gate. This time, with the help of a few guests who I'll introduce as we go along, we'll bust a myth, hear from someone speaking from experience, and I'll give you a quick tip on a conversational investment opportunity, all on the theme of language. So we come to this week's myth. If we all speak English, we share a common language, right? Yep, well, I know that's a common assumption, but that's the trouble. Assumption stops us seeing blindingly obvious trip hazards, like the fact that a common language isn't always equally common to everyone who's using it. Okay, so sometimes the results are just funny or maybe slightly cringeworthy, like this example from business coach Hugo High.
I got a book when we moved that was written by an executive, I think for one of the Dutch multinationals, and he had lived abroad, and in his 40 years he had collected all the funny expressions that he had heard over the years. And one of them, which I think is still one of my greatest, that I would like to share, it was one of the first ministers from Holland. And she went to a big banquet in Hong Kong and she had to do a speech. It was the first time that she was minister. So she was doing a speech and she said, I am Minister of the Inland and I'm having my first period.
Okay. And everybody said, too much information. Yeah. Whoops. But sometimes the confusion causes real conflict with human as well as financial costs. Back in the early 2000s, the mass migration of British call centres to India made perfect economic sense. On paper, there was a big pool of English-speaking graduates looking for work, and employing them would grow the Indian economy at a fraction of the cost of employing British workers. What's not to like? Well, as it turned out, quite a lot. A combination of strong accents, cultural differences, and dodgy phone lines, also designed to keep costs down, by the way, created so much frustration at both ends of the line. Operators didn't stick around for very long and customers took their business elsewhere. Some organisations made it work, of course, but for companies like Santander and Aviva, it turned out to be a real false economy. Today, the Indian economy is growing, of course, so salaries are rising. But British companies are still looking to cut costs, so they're taking their call centres to places like the Philippines or parts of Africa. Problem solved? No, not really. Not if my experience earlier this week was anything to go by. I'll tell you about that on the blog. The tripwires are even harder to spot when everyone's speaking the same native language, as American businesswoman Colleen Jolly discovered on her first trip to the UK.
I was very excited, and it turned out, erroneously assumed that we spoke the same language.
I remember that assumption. I did that. Going the other way.
Yes, I thought, well, they speak English, we speak English. This is going to be very, very easy. That turned out not to be the case whatsoever. But I, of course, did not know that at the time and came to that conclusion slowly over the course of many years and many trips across the Atlantic.
Yeah, it's a realisation that dawns gradually, isn't it?
Yes. You have just enough communication missteps where you start to think, hang on, I don't think that word means the same thing that you think it means. I tend to speak on visual communications topics, helping people improve their visual information, particularly when it is designed to both inform and then ultimately persuade. Very relevant in a sales, also many educational kind of ways. So I made sure that I had updated all of the colors in the presentation to be most appropriate for this audience. All of the images were very appropriate, all of these things. So I thought, I'd really made sure there were, U's in color and there were, no Z's to be found. And I thought I had quite prepared myself, and I wanted to do what I would consider an introductory presentation. So I, labeled it Visual Communications 101.
Ah. Yeah. I've spotted a problem.
Yeah, so I'm glad, gold star you, because you spotted it quickly. It took me forever to spot this.
Yeah, but I read 1984 by George Orwell for O-level, so 101 to me means the room where the scariest thing of all scariest things lurks, you know.
Yeah, and bad on the conference organizers, because I had set them, name of this, presentation, and they said, all right, sure, 11 a.m., Colleen Jolly, Visual Communications 101, all laughing behind their hands. Because to me, to an American, that numerical designator is associated with university classes.
Okay.
So when you would start at the 100 level, so you might have a class of 101, then a 102 would be slightly more advanced than a 101 going up.
Yep.
So I was really making sure it was labeled as introductory.
This is
so
the beginning. I'm starting you from scratch, basically. And I'm starting you in the scariest room you can possibly imagine.
Yes.
Nice.
Apparently. and again, to their credit, I wound up giving the presentation twice over the course of the conference, and I had completely full rooms, people hanging from the rafters, full rooms, and they all started giving me this really deathly blank stare. And all I could think of was, these poor people, they've never thought of color theory or fonts, like, oh, this is so new, these poor things. I'll speak more slowly, they'll understand.
Of course, we don't have to go anywhere, physically or virtually, to be divided by a common language, do we? I mean, all we have to do is talk to someone in a different industry. Speaking from experience this week is Solicitor Chris Arnheim, who's now retired. Chris and I had very different legal careers, spanning different times, but we did have one thing in common, and that was a commitment to plain English. It's actually what sparked our first conversation back in 2009, and it was what prompted me to ask him to do a podcast with me several years later. So when we sat down in his kitchen, I had to start by asking him for his takes on jargon.
Well, I think a lot of jargon is shorthand. It's a reference to shared experience or shared knowledge that the group has, and they know clearly what it means, and they don't need to give a lengthy definition or explanation each time they use it. But it's also a way of showing members of the group that you're part of the group by using their jargon in the correct way.
Certainly the two industries that I've been involved in through my career, law and media, they are both riddled with jargon, and you do show yourself up if you use the wrong word in the wrong context.
Lawyers I know about, having been a lawyer for a long time, and lawyers are very good at jargon. We're very proud of controlling the words we use and being very specific about what our words mean. We have long definition sections in our documents.
Oh, yes. And is that part of it? The clarity and or the precision of a document, what we think of, I say we now as a client, what we think of as jargon, is it sometimes to achieve that clarity and that precision? It seemed to be when I was working in the law that was part of the purpose of it.
I'm itching to talk about clarity and precision now, because I think that they're not friends. I think they fight each other.
They're not the same thing, certainly.
Clarity is making something easy to understand, and precision is making something very, very accurate. And lawyers make things accurate by having lots of qualifications on an initial statement, and it generally makes it very hard for an outsider, a client or non-specialist to understand. So clarity and precision, you need to strike a balance between the two as a lawyer, I think, and be quite careful that you're not achieving too much clarity at the expense of precision, or the other way around.
Now, we do in this country, we have got the Plain English campaign, haven't we? You were saying to me before we started recording, they're mainly concerned with consumer terms and conditions.
They've done a lot of work with banks and other large businesses to make sure that the standard terms and conditions that those organisations use are understandable to the layman. And I mean, I think that that's been widely respected.
What are the basic principles of the Plain English campaign? I know you've looked into it a bit.
The overriding principle is that you can do whatever you like as long as it makes the language easier to understand and implement. So what the Plain English campaigns say is use short sentences, use active verbs, so I slammed the door rather than the door was slammed. Mm-hmm. use lists, use words that are appropriate to the reader.
Yeah.
But as I say, what they also say is you can ignore grammar, you can start sentences with and or but, you can split infinitives, you can end sentences with prepositions. You can do whatever you like if it's going to make the sentence flow better and make it easier to understand.
I can see that wouldn't play very well in the context of legal writing, would it?
It depends, who you're writing for and what you want to achieve. If what you're trying to do is make documents accessible to your clients, then I think it makes a lot of sense. If you're trying to demonstrate that you are a strict grammarian and a lawyer with 30 years experience, then maybe it's less attractive.
It's not good for the image then.
I think a lot of things lawyers do, they do because they think they're good for their image rather than good for their clients.
Yeah.
And I think the Plain English campaign would say that that's a wrong priority.
Certain types of jargon crosses industrial boundaries without any problems at all. I'm talking about the language of the corporate cock-up. My favourite, for its sheer impenetrability, is cost synergies. Better deals with suppliers? Maybe. Price rises? Possibly. Nope, neither of those. It means job cuts. Now, I'm all for turning a negative into a positive, but come on, that's just word fog. Normally at this point in the show, I'll be highlighting what I'll call a conversational investment opportunity. Basically, I'll give you a tip to help you improve and enhance your conversations at work. I know from experience that when you speak an industrial language every day, it becomes natural. That's fine when you're talking to fellow native speakers, but it's good to be prepared for those times when we're not. So it's well worth investing in conversations with people outside your sector just to find out how often you use things like acronyms without thinking about it. It really will pay off when you have to deal with an industry newbie or an outsider, especially if you're trying to manage conflict with that person or head it off before it starts. Before I go, I'm going to share a clip from one of the earliest podcasts I ever did. It was a discussion about transatlantic networking, and it involved 2 Americans and 2 Brits. On the American side were Mark Amtower and Ardell Fleeson. On the British side, there was Ardell's colleague, Chris Tollest, and me. Now, this is quite nostalgic for me because we actually recorded it in a very nice London studio. And as I sit here talking to you now at home with one neighbour having her cleaner in and the other playing loud music, I miss that. But back to the point. There was a lot of serious discussion that afternoon. Well, some anyway. But there was also a lot of silliness. Like this. We've got a nice balanced group, 2 Brits and 2 Americans.
And on opposite sides of the table.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Was that deliberate?
No, absolutely not.
So this has now become
We
the
can
Atlantic...
take them, Mardo.
No.
So this desk has now become the Atlantic Ocean.
And the English don't like confrontation.
No.
They
So,
always seem to win when there's no confrontation. It's very mysterious.
well, we do confrontation by the back door, but that's another programme. Okay. There is one thing that I cannot abide in this country or anywhere, and that is the jargon that surrounds the networking industry. I mean, I'm allergic to jargon anyway.
Ardell and I come from a jargon-infested town, Washington, D.C., and a niche in that town, the contracting community, that speaks in acronyms. And if you are not privy to the acronym of the day, and it can change quite quickly, all of the contracts, for instance, spell out different words, new words, weird words.
Such as?
Well, soup. There's a contract that I'll be doing the keynote for the soup contract this coming year.
And it's not about cream of tomato.
No.
SEW.
I'd probably know more about it if it was, but
SEWP.
Super Electronic Workstation Program.
Not the first thing that springs to mind if you mention soup.
And the symbol for it is a duck, so it's easy as duck soup.
Okay.
So,
I heard an entire speech once during the time that DISA was being established. It was the only words that weren't acronyms were if and perhaps and. But everybody in the room understood.
Yeah, what was that?
Oh, just the Defense Information Systems Administration. So it's just a whole.
Right, it's an acronym.
We all know.
Speak in acronyms.
Yeah, we speak in acronyms.
Oh, that was a fun afternoon. How can I follow that? Well, I can't. So I will just wish you a peaceful and productive week, and I'll talk to you next time. If you need help with any aspect of conflict management at work, come and talk to me. All my details are on the website, savvybusinessresolutions.com.